Are you feeling not good enough, imposter syndrome, perfectionism? You'll definitely want to listen to today's episode with Heather Mills. You'll get some great insights and breakthroughs that could be saving you from further damage in your life. Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Vasallo. And each week, I will bring you amazing guests so that you can tap into the courage to break out of old patterns and live your soul's purpose. Before we get into this episode, if by the end you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, review, and share the podcast so we can reach more people. Because here's the thing, I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please take action by rating, reviewing, following, and sharing the podcast. We can only do this together. Check out the link in the show notes to see how this is done. And make sure to stay until the end to claim some free gifts I have for you. Welcome back to the Courage to Be. We have Heather Mills with us today. Hi, Heather.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Heather, tell us a little bit about your story, how you've gotten to where you're at right now. What's been your path?
Sure. So I was a class action attorney and social justice attorney, and I became disillusioned and burned out and felt like I was a zombie walking through my life. So I decided to leave the law, and I didn't have a plan, but eventually I became a certified life coach, and now I specialize in helping women overcome burnout.
Wow, burnout is such a hot topic. Can we dive a little bit deeper into burnout?
Absolutely.
Tell us how you discovered that you were in burnout and how you tackled it. Is that how you got into life coaching, or did that come later? Like, how did you deal with burnout? How did you identify it? How did you deal with it? So it can maybe give us some ideas to our listeners of
Yeah,
if they're in burnout.
it's a great question. It is a hot topic right now. And I think that burnout is so insidious that we don't often recognize that it's happening. And that's what happened to me. I thought burnout was something that happened to other people who were working too hard and had physical symptoms that they had to deal with so bad that they had to quit working, right? That they were forced to quit working. And that wasn't my case. I was in search of more meaning and purpose and fulfillment. And what happened was that I worked all the time, and I didn't, I kind of abandoned the rest of my life. I was just working. So there was nothing else to give me any meaning and fulfillment. And I didn't yet know that meaning and fulfillment came from inside of me. And I was still looking to create it from external factors, external sources outside of me. And so I kind of went on a journey. I did a 4-month travel through Asia. I did the Eat, Pray, Love journey. I went to India.
How was that?
And Thailand, and did the whole thing, the yoga, the meditation. And I didn't necessarily find the right answers because I was still searching for something external. And it took actually years for me to recognize that what I was really looking for was inside of me. And so I eventually, got into coaching. And even still, there's a lot of coaching out there that focuses on external sources and external experts. And it wasn't until I decided that I was the expert on me that the real healing began.
Wow, that is amazing. So when you did this journey, you come back after 4 months, and did you think or that you were going to feel enlightened? Like, what was your reaction when you got back?
Scared, because I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. But I was willing to explore, and I was curious. And so what I did find was a coaching class. It was like an introduction to coaching. And I didn't think that I was going to go into coaching, but I was interested in personal development at that time, and thought that, oh, I could benefit from this. So I'm just going to go to this coaching class and learn about what coaching is. And I loved it so much that I just kept going back. And that was kind of the beginning of my part of the beginning of my personal development journey.
And how did it continue? Because I think personal development, once we dip our toes into it, it's like we keep on wanting more and more. I don't know if that's how you feel. I
Yeah,
feel
for
like I've been on
sure.
that, yeah, on that journey for like
Definitely.
20 something years.
Yes, absolutely. And there's always deeper layers to get to, right? And so I started coaching. I kept going to the coaching classes and I got certified and I started coaching women through career transition. And I also started teaching women how to negotiate in the workplace. And
Ooh.
I really liked that work. And I got to a point where I wanted to go deeper. Why weren't women negotiating in the workplace? What was holding them back? What was stopping them? What had stopped me? And, these were smart, ambitious women, yet still not wanting to go into the workplace and negotiate for more. And this is when I started going into the deeper layers of socialization and how we're socialized as women to not ask, to be grateful, to be good girls, to not rock the boat. And of course, I understood all of this kind of at an intellectual level, but really going into deeper and how this shapes who we are, how we see the world, and what's possible for us. That's where I went, where it got really interesting for me. And that's when I started to recognize like, I didn't want to just teach negotiation skills. I wanted to help women develop the skills to, not the skills, it was more like I wanted to help women develop a relationship with themselves that was loving, where they could accept themselves, love themselves right where they were. They didn't need to be fixed because that's part of what
Mhm.
led me to my burnout is feeling like I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't good enough in my job, that imposter syndrome, the perfectionism, and never feeling good enough to get to the level I wanted to, right? So being able to go deeper and develop that relationship where you love yourself, accept yourself, trust yourself, and see that you're really the expert on your life and no one else can be the expert for you.
There's so many little bits there that I want to ask you about. So when you discover that a lot has to do with the not good enough, the way we're supposed to behave, the way we're supposed to be as women, or in your case, how you're supposed to be, how you were raised. But I think it's a pretty universal ways and programmings that many women have. How do you deal, first off, where does the not good enough come from in your case? Whose voice is that?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with it? Like when
Mhm.
because to me, I'm getting to know you. You're telling me, attorney, class action suits, social justice, like to me, like you're like up on a pedestal, like, wow, lawyer, like look at all these degrees and credentials. And I feel like a lot of women, they say that there's more women enrolled in graduating from colleges than men are right now. And I think
Yeah.
part of it is because of patriarchy, because we're needing to prove ourselves through all these degrees, through all these certifications. So I'm seeing you from the outside as like, wow, she's so capable. Look at everything. Like, again, you're up on a pedestal. I'm like, you have everything. How is she feeling? Like I'm trying to understand how is Heather feeling not good enough? Like you've had all these successes. Can you share a little bit about where's that coming from and how you've dealt with it?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I really do think it's a universal thing, especially for people who have been socialized as women, because we are taught that our value comes from helping other people and from what we do as opposed to who we are. We don't get the messages when we're young that we all inherently have value, right? It's like at some point, we see that babies are valuable and worthy, but at some point we lose that and like we have to prove that we are valuable and worthy. It's so crazy. And so it goes back to our childhood wiring, our cultural programming that sends us these messages. And I don't necessarily think that I got these message explicitly. No one ever told me I wasn't good enough. No one ever told me that I couldn't do it. In fact, I'm sure my parents told me the opposite, but our subconscious brains do funny things. And at some point in our childhood, usually before we're 7 years old, we come into contact with a person, place, or a thing. We have a deep emotion and we decide something about ourselves. Usually that it's, I don't matter, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, something similar to that, right? And then we believe it, and then we use that as a lens to view the world. And for me, what I experienced is I had to go back and somehow see that that was false. And that took me that doesn't require some deep work, right? To really expose the lies that we started to believe about ourselves when we were kids.
That is amazing. Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you've been programmed in this way, like we're saying, we've taken it, we've got a meaning, we've made meaning of certain things in those first young years, 0 to 7, and you're in your 40s or your 50s, it's going to take a lot of time or some time, it's not going to happen overnight. I always say with my clients that this is ongoing work. It's going to keep on showing up. Was there a point that you remember clearly of how you gave meaning of not feeling good enough with something when you were a kid? I have a couple of stories of that. That's why I'm curious, because they tend to be like the silliest things too, when you talk with other people, when I've talked with clients. So what was it for you?
Yeah. Well, so for me, I remember being in the 4th grade and having a teacher who I thought was very strict, and believing that I needed to get like 100% on every single test and do everything perfectly and get it all right. And if I didn't get it right, something really bad was going to happen. And I started to get so stressed out that I started getting migraines in the 4th grade.
Oh my God. And then that's the meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
And you carry that. And then what's interesting to this, because we both study and do similar work, is we end up taking that meaning and then we carry it on as we're growing up, and you become a teenager, then you're
without even realizing
an adult. But then you start looking for evidence of that to back it up. Like that's not perfect, or that's not, have you noticed that happened to you?
Our brain is constantly scanning for information to confirm the beliefs we already have about ourselves.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. Let's go back to burnout. And you've mentioned this in our shorter episode of the different layers of burnout. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think we all have an idea of what burnout is. Like, they're just a workaholic, they work too much, and, they had a heart attack, or they had some other health issue. Yes. What are the different layers of burnout as you've been studying them and working with your clients on that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I see burnout happening at multiple levels. So it definitely happens at the physical level because stress has an impact on our body. It's the whole system of adrenaline, cortisol, heart rate, blood pressure. That has an effect physically on our bodies. Yes. But then there's also the emotional level where, we've cared so much that we can't care anymore. We become numb. And, what I felt like was that I lost the empathy that I was like part of who I was before. I just felt numb. And then mentally, we're overwhelmed with our own thoughts, right? Usually self-critical thoughts. We're overwhelmed by the thought that we're not doing it well enough, and that we're never going to be able to, and that we're always going to have a to-do list that we'll never finish. That's the mental overwhelm. And then there's the cultural programming, the cultural level, the messages that we get that our value comes from our productivity. Our value, especially as women, comes from helping and doing things for other people, and that we're not inherently valuable, that we're not inherently worthy. And then spiritually, it's the disconnection from who we are at our core, disconnection from our true self.
Wow, there's so many different parts there. So how do you deal with those self-critical thoughts? I have more questions within the different layers, but I'll start there. Like, how do you deal with the self-criticism or the inner critics, like I like calling them?
Yeah, there's so many ways. I mean, part of what my strategy is by developing a different relationship where you're with yourself, where you are, instead of constantly beating yourself up for not doing it well enough, you come to your life and who you are with compassion and curiosity. So, kind of acknowledging that inner critic voice it's not going away. It's always going to be there. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And I'm not going to take direction for that. And you know what? I'm not going to believe it either, because most of what the inner critic says is complete nonsense, complete lies. And so we just have to recognize that maybe there's a grain of truth in there somewhere, maybe not, but most of it is just, it's lies.
Yeah. But how do you deal with them? Do you say something out loud? Do you write? Do you journal? Like, how do you identify that criticism, and how do you deal with it? I have my way and I'll share it now, but I'm curious to hear how you're dealing with, like, say, I don't know, you're doing something new, I don't know, with work. Maybe you're launching a new program and only 3 people signed up for the class. And here you are, you start beating yourself and you can hear it in your head. Like, I'm just not worth it. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I'm not meant for this. I should just stick to what I know. Boom. What do you identified it. Now, what do you do?
So for me, like, I think the shift happened in the changing my relationship with myself. So now I don't take that as seriously. I don't take it at face value. I just see it for like, oh, there's that inner critic. Interesting. And I either redirect or say thank you and come up with what I know is true for me, which is not, a different kind of belief, which is I'm doing the best that I can. I'm putting myself out there. I'm sharing who I am, what I think, my opinions. And here's the one that I think really helps me is that there's no right or wrong. I used to really worry about wanting to get it right. And so I finally came to this piece of like, there's no right. There's just, there's just moving forward. There's just imperfection. There's just trying and trying again. Yeah. So I'd love to hear what you do. What's your practice?
No, this is interesting. I'm taking notes as you're saying it, because I always like seeing what other people are doing and try it on and see if it works for yourself, right?
Yeah.
For me, I tend to, like, if I catch myself in that thought and if I'm entertaining it too long, I'll immediately, I actually physically either shake my head or, shake the body and just say delete or cancel. Like, no, cancel, delete. If I'm by myself, I'll say it out loud. If I'm with some other people, I won't, because I don't want to sound like a crazy person, like delete, cancel, like maybe they think I have Tourette's syndrome or something. So I'll just say it in my head. And then I'll just try and replace it. Like what you're saying, I'll replace it with a different thought. Like, no, that's not true. Well, 3 people showed up to the class. That's 3 people that I've changed their lives, or 3 people that I made a difference in their day. So it's fine. I'm doing it fine. Or it's just an experiment. That I use that a lot too, because I used to judge myself, I think as women, we tend to judge ourselves. Well, I think women and men in general, but it all ties back into the not good enough, like what we were saying before. And I'll just be like, no, that was a 3-person class. That was great, and it was an experiment. I'll leave it as I'm experimenting. And so I'm just taking notes of what just happened. It doesn't mean that I'm not good enough. It doesn't mean that I'm not meant for this. It doesn't mean that, I don't know, whatever it is. So
yeah, we're not going to make it mean anything different about ourselves. I love this, because I think in both the way, what we're both doing is really rewiring our brains. So we've got that old neural pathway that says that, we should judge ourselves and beat ourselves up. And then we come up with a new thought. You're building new neural pathways of, this is an experiment. Let's be curious. Let's try something else, redirecting.
Yes, those are great. I love that we're putting our brains together for some ideas of how to rewire the brain. And what are some other symptoms besides numbness? And can you talk about numbness too? Like when you felt that numbness, So it's more than anything for other people to identify it and be like, oh, I thought burnout was this, but I have that symptom. Maybe I should check in with myself, like what's going on? Like, what are some other symptoms that you've noticed with burnout?
Yes. Well, so the numbness, I mean, some people describe it as like, I feel like a zombie walking through my life, or, I used to care a lot, maybe too much about my clients or my colleagues. And now it feels like I don't care anymore at all. I don't feel anything. What else?
Could it be like that for your family too? Like, I don't feel anything for my family,
Yeah, I think
like
it's
I'm just
just,
like disengaged with my husband or my wife or my kids,
yeah, like the inability to really be present with people and to connect with people, because a lot of times in burnout we're ruminating, we're in our heads, we're regretting the past or worrying about the future, and it's really hard to be present with the people we care about the most.
And do you think burnout can be dragged out like for years? Like if you're in this
Absolutely.
numbness? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. For sure. And for me, I definitely did drag it out for many years. Yeah, so I think like people can drag it out for many years until they have like a huge health scare, right? That's a lot of the times when people recognize, oh, maybe I do have all the symptoms of burnout. So, what I try to do is help educate people to see the signs earlier so that they can prevent that full burnout from happening,
Yes.
that health scare from happening.
Because that's what I tend to hear from a lot of other women, that are colleagues, friends, family. Like, I see it more and more, which is kind of scary because I think women, we tend to suffer too from this super women complex, like, let me just do everything. Like you were saying, we find that value or our worth, and how productive are we, how much are we giving to others, and so then we act and we behave by being the superwoman, like,
Yeah,
I have to be the best wife, I have to be the best daughter, I have to be the best mom, I have to be the best in my career and my business, whatever it is. Where was I going with this? So with burnout, with the symptoms, that I see a lot of these women, because we're living these roles, we're stepping into these roles of doing everything. It gets to a point where if we don't listen to those signs, we end up getting that health scare,
yeah.
whether it's a cancer, whether it's adrenal
Autoimmune disorder.
fatigues, any
Yeah,
type of disorder that doctors might not even identify. I can count with more fingers in my hand of women that I know that have gone through this. So it's not
absolutely.
like rare, let's put it that way.
That's so true.
So going back to some of the symptoms so that we can identify them before we've hit a health scare. And I'm not saying if you do have a health condition that it has happened to you because of burnout, like, just
Right.
pay attention, listen to yourself. And like you said, this might take years, but for those people that have not hit a health scare, what other symptoms? So you said numbness, like just disconnection from people, maybe even
Just
from
like
their
that,
work.
always feeling exhausted, like
Exactly.
you've never slept well enough, right? You wake up and you're still tired. There was something else that just came to mind too. Oh, a lot of my clients tell me like, I feel like I could cry at the littlest things. I get an email from my boss that is like no big deal, and it sends me over the edge. I'm just like in a puddle of tears all of a sudden. So it's that
Yeah.
emotional resilience that we're lacking that is what happens with burnout. We need, and part of that is the stress, what chronic stress does to your body, but what it also does to you emotionally.
Wow. Yes, that is so great. So how can we start overcoming it? You said connecting, having a better relationship with yourself, but how can we cultivate that? Do I need to sit down in meditation? Because I know a lot of people struggle with that too. I personally like journaling. I do meditations. I do visualizations. I've been doing this for decades, but I know of people that don't enjoy doing these things. So how can we create that better connection with ourselves so that we can go inwards? Like, what are
Yes.
some other tips or tools that you could give our listeners regarding to
Yes.
overcome burnout?
Well, I also use journaling and visualizations and meditations. I facilitate those with my clients. And, journaling, part of like connecting with the different parts of you, the part of you that's scared and the part of you that feels confident. Because I think that women feel in that conflict all the time. Like, I do feel confident in this one place and work. And then, I feel stressed out and like an imposter in this other area. Or sometimes I feel confident and sometimes I feel like an imposter, right? And so journaling those conflicting voices can help. And also, I think we all just need more space and time to be. We don't create that for ourselves. We're
Oh,
always doing, doing, doing. We're so busy. Just taking a moment to be in nature, and it doesn't have to be a long time. It might mean stepping outside of your door and noticing the tree nearby and breathing in the fresh air, taking a moment to notice, any awe or wonder that you feel or gratitude. It can be really simple to start, and it doesn't always have to be meditation either.
thank you for saying that because I always say that meditation does not have to be sitting in the lotus position for hours. It can be 10 minutes going for a walk outdoors in silence, without the dogs, without kids, without anyone. Meditation could be journaling. Meditation could just be sitting in silence on the couch, not in the lotus position, just sitting in a comfortable position.
So true.
So I appreciate you sharing that. That's a great suggestion. What are some of, going back to the journaling, what are some of the prompts? Like, do you set yourself some prompts for the confident side of yourself and the one that might be in burnout? Or do you just do stream of thought and just let the writing come out?
No, I have a practice where it's like voice dialoguing. Like, what does that part of me that is scared need to say? And what does that part of me that feels confident want to say? So I'm not much for stream of conscious journaling. I've tried plenty of that. For me, I need a little more direction.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And if for anyone listening, this is great. Again, like meditation that I said, it doesn't have to look a certain way. For Heather, what works is having these different prompts. And I'm curious
Yeah.
about it because I'm the opposite. I'm like, I just do stream of consciousness and just write for, I don't know, at least half an hour every morning. And then ideas will come to me. But I
Mhm.
also like journaling with a set of prompts, like that dialoguing, like you're
Yeah.
saying, kind of like dialoguing with my higher self, dialoguing
Mhm.
with spirit, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So that's great that you're sharing that and what works for you and what doesn't work for you so that
Right.
anyone
We're
that's
all so
listening.
different.
Yes. But what I want to go back to what you were saying about taking more time to just be. I feel like, can you talk more about this? I feel like in this day and age with so much information bombardment, we just take in information, scroll through social media, look at our emails, read posts, like the other day I found myself, with the family. My husband was on his phone, my daughter was on her phone, I was on my phone. I know this is not the rare exception, so I'm just being honest of what I was witnessing. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, is this how we connect in the 21st century? Like we all just do our own thing because we are just consuming and consuming information, but we are not taking time to connect with each other, and we are not taking time to connect with ourselves. Like you're
Ourselves.
saying, of just being. Talk to us more about that, Heather. Like, how can we cultivate that? Where does that come from? Why have we just forgotten that and just pushed it to the side? Like we don't value that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, think that's partly our cultural programming, our capitalist economy. The messages are that we need to be doing in order to prove how valuable we are, and that to be a good person, you should be working hard, right? That's what really gets people, I think. Like they feel guilty if they're not doing something for somebody else or cleaning up the house or doing some chores or, just doing something. And that is such a disservice to ourselves. That really creates no opportunity for us to connect with ourselves. And I know that sounds abstract, but like I really didn't know how to have a relationship with myself until I started diving into this work. I was all about doing and being busy, and I was addicted to busy. And I also felt guilty if I wasn't doing something. But what I recognized finally was that that feeling of emptiness, feeling unfulfilled, feeling like you don't have a purpose, or just that emptiness, that comes from not being able to connect with ourselves. And it can start small, connecting with ourselves, going back to our childhood, who am I? What kind of beliefs did I start creating about myself then? And that happens in walks with yourself around the block. That can happen sitting outside in a chair. That can happen, it doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to take a long time. It can just start small with like thinking, connecting with all of the parts of the younger parts of you and the current emotions that are coming up.
That's great. Thank you for sharing those and giving us some pointers of how we can start cultivating and creating that space for just being. Because I do believe I find myself in that label too. When you said addicted to busy, ooh, that resonated with me because one of the things that I decided last year, I get emails from friends or colleagues like, oh, I know you're busy. And I don't want that label anymore. Like I'll hear it from colleagues, I'll hear it from my husband, or I'll hear it from different people. That doesn't matter. And I decided purposely last year, I said, I don't want that label. I don't want to be seen as busy or that I don't have time for people and there also has to be, I want to talk a little bit about this and how you perceive it and how you're letting go of that addiction to busy, because there also has to be some boundaries, like around your time, especially for us as moms, where, like I had someone email me a couple of weeks ago, like, there's no more room in your schedule until a month from now for a connection call. And I'm like, well, I have my systems in place, like I can't just drop for everyone, like within business. Like, I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that? I feel like sometimes I get caught up in this place of, do I just leave my schedule open and be available for everyone so that I can let go of this busy label? Or how do you tackle that? How do you deal of letting go of that label of busy or that addiction to busy?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think happens is that we wear busy like a badge of honor, right? Because our culture tells us that busy is good. That means we must be valuable, we must be important, we must be doing something right. And so I think like checking in with it, is that really true? Do we really believe that? Does it make us more important or valuable if all of our time is filled? And so what I've had to come to, what's the word, a reckoning with that, right? And start to change my beliefs around that I don't need to be busy and scheduled to feel good about myself, to feel like I'm worthy and important and valuable. The feelings of worthiness and value I get from the inside. I create them from myself rather than looking for that external badge again. I think that's what that busyness does for us. There's that payoff that if other people see that we're busy, we must be important. We must be, productive. And it all goes back to that worthiness. If we're busy, if we're doing things for others, or if we're busy and productive. And the other thing is like, I think it's great that you're creating boundaries around your time. And just because you have scheduled slots and they're filled, I would say that doesn't necessarily mean you're too busy, right?
Yeah, you're right. And also in part, educating other people that you're calling it busy. I'm just calling it's a system. I need to have systems in place I only do X amount of connection calls a week. I only do X amount of whatever sales calls or whatever it is that you're doing in your life, or I take my kids to do these amount of so it's just also understanding and coming to terms for me, in this particular case of, because someone said, you're so busy, there's no room in your schedule, to question that and ask, is that true? That's
Yeah.
their perception. That doesn't mean that I identify with that anymore.
Right.
And to me, there's also another layer as you're saying all this with the busyness and doing, and that's the badge of honor. And that's where I wanted to separate from that. I want my badge of honor to be I'm doing things and I'm having success in my business and in my life with ease. I
Mhm.
want
Yeah.
that to be my badge of honor.
Right.
But I wonder sometimes if people that are really busy, and maybe you can talk about this that you've seen within your clients or you've seen it in yourself, do we also, besides the fact that because we want to feel validated and that's the badge of honor, could we be making ourselves busy, being moms, being wives, being caretakers, for our elder parents or family members or whatever, and our work? Could we be being busy to not deal with the emotions that are underneath?
Oh, such a good question. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is a lot of times we are busy in order to avoid our feelings, for sure. I mean, when I was a lawyer, I pretty much pushed down, suppressed most of my emotions, but I, you, I would never have been able to express that to anyone because I couldn't recognize that I was really doing that. Or I was
Yeah.
kind of, lying to myself. No, I'm fine. I feel my emotions. It's okay. I have a healthy emotional life. But there was definitely a lot of, it's much easier to go to work and do something that you're good at than it may be to have a difficult conversation with somebody important in your life.
Or to feel
The
those
feelings
those
associated with that.
to
Yeah.
feel those emotions too, because I mean I've just been dealing with grief and sadness and sorrow and stuff in these last
Yeah.
month or whatever. And one of the things that came up for me is just I wanted to get busy to not have to
Mm.
feel the feelings.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking you, because I think when those feelings that we label negative, because
Mhm.
they're not really negative, it's just the opposite side. There's
Yeah.
happiness, there's sadness, you can't always be happy. Like that's the bottom line. So we are emotional beings. Like the weather, there's going to be cloudy days and there's going to be sunny days, but we all want the sunny days all the time. But you need the cloudy days because you need the rainy days to, fertilize the ground. And, it's such an interesting thing of learning to deal and to allow those emotions to pass, whether
Yeah.
it's sadness, grief, or other rage, anger, fill in the blank, whatever
Yes.
emotion that we've labeled negative, and just allow them to pass. Because I think allow them to pass, sit with them, deal with them, whether it's journaling, meditating, just being outdoors, like you're saying, or I think it cures it much faster than suppressing it and just getting busy
Yeah.
and
The
breaking.
busyness and the avoiding just makes those emotions actually stronger, right? And if we just
Yeah.
took the time to process them, to feel them, they would actually pass more quickly. But we're so afraid of them, or we so, want to avoid them. And I definitely did that. My father passed away right as I was making this transition, leaving the law and trying to find what I was doing next. And it was very eye opening for me to not have my job to keep me busy, and how I approached grief during that time period.
Was it scary? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I tried to get busy in other ways, right? I tried to still avoid, but at some point, part of my travels was allowing myself to be and feel my emotions and write and journal. That was definitely a time period where I did a lot of, free writing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I had,
Wow. Thank you so much, Heather. So many great insights in our conversation today. Where can people find you?
yes, you can find me by checking out my podcast. It's called the Burned Podcast, and you can find it wherever you find your podcast.
And we'll have that in the show notes. And what's one thing that you can leave our listeners with to live a life with more courage?
Oh, to live a life. So for me, it's growing my passion just a little bit stronger than my fear. taking the fear
I
with
love
me, but making sure the passion, the desire, the commitment is just a little bit stronger than the fear.
I love that. Thank you so much, Heather. I appreciate your time with us today. And I look forward to staying connected. Everyone, you can go check out Heather's podcast and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me.
I am so grateful that you joined me today. If you enjoyed it, there's one thing I'd like you to do. Click on the follow button so you don't miss a single episode. Leave me a rating and a review, and please share. As my way to thank you, email us a screen grab of your review at the email in the show notes, and we will send you a free Crafting Your Future guided visualization, which is so simple to do with outstanding results. It will empower you and give you the confidence to attract and create the life you've always desired. See you in our next episode.